The crystal spires of Zephyria Prime stretched toward three purple suns, their surfaces reflecting the glory of the ethereal kingdom that had ruled this sector for over 10,000 cycles. Within the grand throne room, made from polished obsidian and floating crystals, King Valtheron sat upon his elevated seat, his four arms crossed in obvious displeasure. His translucent blue skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed his current mood. Sharp red lines pulsed across his forehead like angry scars. Before him stood the human delegate, Ambassador Marcus Chen, looking remarkably calm despite being surrounded by beings that could crush him with their bare hands. The ethereals towered over humans by at least 2 meters, their graceful forms built for both beauty and strength. Their society had conquered dozens of worlds, not through technology alone, but through physical superiority that had never been challenged. "You stand in the presence of greatness, small creature." King Valtheron's voice resonated through the chamber like rolling thunder. "Yet your species dares to reject our generous offer of protection. You claim humans deserve equal treatment in our alliance?" His laugh was cold and musical. "Your kind barely reaches our waists. Your bones break like twigs. Your lifespans flicker by like dying stars." Marcus kept his hands clasped behind his back, his expression neutral. "Your Majesty, humans have proven themselves capable in many endeavors. We've contributed advanced technologies, solved complex diplomatic issues, and established successful colonies across the frontier. We simply ask for fair representation in the Galactic Council." The king's 4 eyes narrowed simultaneously. "Technologies?" He waved one massive hand dismissively. "Clever toys from a species too weak to matter. You've never proven yourselves where it truly counts, in the arena of physical prowess. Every great civilization in this galaxy has earned their place through strength." Murmurs rippled through the assembled court. Dozens of ethereal nobles stood along the walls, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with amusement. They wore flowing robes that seemed to float around their tall frames, and their faces showed the kind of casual superiority that came from never being challenged. "Perhaps," suggested Lord Xanath, the king's chief advisor, "we should demonstrate the futility of their position. A practical lesson in reality." King Valtheron's patterns shifted to a pleased golden glow. "Yes, an excellent suggestion." He leaned forward on his throne, studying Marcus like a scientist examining an interesting but ultimately insignificant specimen. "Human, we challenge you to trial by combat. Choose your finest warrior, and they shall face our champion in single combat. When your warrior falls, you will accept your proper place as a client species." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "And if our warrior wins?" The entire court erupted in musical laughter. The sound was beautiful and terrible, like crystal bells being shattered. King Valtheron wiped at his eyes with one hand while supporting himself on the throne with another. "If your warrior wins," the king said between chuckles, "we will not only grant you equal status, but I will personally recommend your species for advanced membership in the Galactic Council. However, such an outcome is as likely as these suns going dark." "I accept your challenge," Marcus said without hesitation. The laughter stopped abruptly. King Valtheron's patterns shifted to surprised orange. "You accept? Just like that? Do you not wish to consult with your fleet? Send word to your homeworld for a champion?" "No need, Your Majesty. We have a champion here." Lord Xanath stepped forward, his own patterns flickering with curiosity. "Here? Where? I see only you and your small escort of guards." Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the throne room. "Our champion is among my escort, as you noted." The king's gaze swept over the 3 humans who had accompanied Marcus. They stood quietly near the entrance, wearing simple black uniforms that marked them as Earth Defense Corps personnel. 2 men and 1 woman, all of unremarkable appearance by human standards. To ethereal eyes, they looked like children playing dress-up in military costumes. "Choose quickly," King Valtheron commanded, his patterns now pulsing with eager anticipation. "I want this farce concluded before the evening meal." Marcus turned toward his escort. "Sergeant Rodriguez, if you would." The woman stepped forward. She was perhaps 1.7 meters tall, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and brown eyes that held a calm alertness. Her uniform was neat, but showed signs of long service. A few carefully mended tears, equipment marks on her belt, the kind of wear that came from actual use rather than parade ground ceremony. The ethereal court's patterns shifted to amused green as they looked at her. She appeared to be in her early 30s by human standards, with the lean build of someone who stayed in shape, but had never been mistaken for a bodybuilder. Next to the towering ethereals, she looked like a child who had wandered into an adult gathering. "This is your champion?" Lord Xanath asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. "This female creature?" "Sergeant Elena Rodriguez," Marcus announced formally. 20-year veteran of the Earth Defense Corps, specialist in hostile environment operations, holder of the Solar Cross for actions beyond the call of duty. King Valtheron gestured grandly. "Very well. Face her, Kythera." The king's champion rose from where she had been kneeling beside the throne. Kythera stood nearly 3 meters tall, her luminous blue skin rippling with defined musculature that would have made human bodybuilders weep with envy. Her forearms moved with perfect coordination, and her traditional combat armor gleamed like polished silver. Etched patterns covered every surface of the armor, each mark representing a victory in formal combat. There were hundreds of them. She had never lost a battle. Kythera's movements were fluid grace personified as she stepped into the cleared space at the center of the throne room. Her armor was a work of art, fitted plates that protected every vital area while allowing full range of motion. The metal itself was forged from rare alloys that could turn aside energy weapons and absorb kinetic impacts that would shatter lesser materials. "I apologize in advance for what must happen," Kythera said, her voice carrying the musical quality of her species, but edged with genuine regret. "You seem like an honorable creature. I will make this quick." Elena Rodriguez stepped forward to meet her, looking absurdly small in comparison. She wore no armor, carried no visible weapons. Her movements were economical, without wasted motion, but she appeared utterly outmatched. The contrast was so stark that several court members had stopped laughing and were now watching with something approaching pity. "The rules are simple," King Valtheron announced. "Combat continues until one fighter yields, is rendered unconscious, or dies. No weapons beyond those gifted by nature and training. Begin when ready." Kythera settled into a combat stance that showcased millions of years of evolutionary refinement. Her species had been apex predators long before they developed civilization, and those instincts remained sharp. Her forearms moved in complex patterns, ready to strike, grapple, or defend as needed. Elena simply stood relaxed, hands at her sides, watching her opponent with quiet attention. "You should take a defensive position," Kythera advised. "I do not wish to harm you through your unpreparedness." "I'm ready," Elena said softly. The tension in the throne room was palpable. Ethereal patterns shifted through various colors, as the assembled nobles positioned themselves for the best view of what they expected to be a very brief demonstration. King Valtheron leaned forward on his throne, 4 eyes focused intently on the mismatched opponents. Kythera began to circle, her movements hypnotically graceful. Each step was perfectly placed, maintaining optimal distance and positioning. Her combat training had begun in childhood and continued for over a century. She had studied every known fighting style in the galaxy, mastered techniques that could drop opponents before they knew the fight had started. Elena remained motionless in the center of the circle, turning slowly to keep her opponent in view. Her breathing was steady, her posture relaxed but somehow coiled. Those who knew what to look for might have noticed the subtle signs. The slight forward lean of her weight, the loose positioning of her hands, the way her eyes tracked not just Kithara's position but her movement patterns. "This is painful to watch," Lord Xanath murmured to a nearby noble. "The poor creature doesn't even know how to fight." The circling continued for long moments. Kithara was looking for the perfect opening, the ideal angle to end this quickly and cleanly. Her opponent's stillness was actually making the task more difficult. She had expected desperate movement, wild attacks, something she could counter and use to create opportunities. Finally, Kithara made her move. It was a textbook combination, a feint with her upper left arm to draw attention high, while her right arms moved in for a grab that would allow her to control her opponent's movement and position for a finishing technique. The attack was so fast that several court members later claimed they hadn't seen it begin. But Elena was no longer where the grab was aimed. She had moved at the last possible instant. A slight sidestep that took her just outside Kithara's reach. As the ethereal champion extended herself in the attack, Elena's right hand moved in a short, sharp arc. The sound of the impact echoed through the crystal chamber like a thunderclap. The silence that followed was absolute. Every being in the throne room stood frozen, their bioluminescent patterns locked in whatever color they had been displaying when the impossible happened. Kithara, the undefeated champion of King Valtheron, staggered backward with her upper left arm hanging useless at her side. The precisely crafted armor plating around her shoulder had cracked in a spiderweb pattern, and bright blue fluid seeped between the breaks. She was bleeding. Elena stood exactly where she had been a moment before, her right hand still extended from the strike. Her expression remained calm, almost thoughtful, as if she were solving a mildly interesting puzzle rather than facing a being who could have snapped her spine without effort. "Impossible," Lord Xanath whispered, his voice barely audible. "The armor is forged from crystalline titanium composite. Nothing short of heavy weapons can—" King Valtheron's patterns shifted rapidly through a spectrum of colors that had no names in human language. Expressions of shock, disbelief, and something approaching fear. His 4 eyes remained locked on his champion, who was examining her damaged arm with growing bewilderment. "How?" Kithara asked, her musical voice strained with pain and confusion. "Your strike. It felt like being hit by a mining beam." Elena rotated her shoulder slightly, working out a minor kink. "Physics is universal. Mass times acceleration equals force. Humans might be smaller, but we understand leverage, momentum, and the weak points in any structure." She paused, studying the damaged armor. "Your armor is beautiful, but it's designed to distribute force across large areas. Concentrate enough energy into a small enough point." She didn't finish the explanation. Kithara was moving again, this time with 3 functional arms and considerably more respect for her opponent. The ethereal champion abandoned her graceful circling in favor of a direct assault, using her reach advantage to launch a series of strikes that should have overwhelmed any opponent through sheer speed and power. Elena responded by doing something that made several court members gasp in surprise. Instead of retreating or trying to block the attacks, she moved forward, stepping inside Kithara's guard where the longer reach became a disadvantage. Her movements were economical and precise, each step calculated to keep her in the narrow zone where her opponent's size worked against her. The next exchange happened so quickly that most observers couldn't follow the individual techniques. Kithara's remaining 3 arms lashed out in complex patterns, each strike powerful enough to shatter stone. But Elena seemed to flow around the attacks like water, her smaller size and lower center of gravity allowing her to duck under swings that would have connected with a taller opponent. She struck twice more in rapid succession. The first blow found a joint in Kithara's armor at the hip, and the metallic ring of impact was accompanied by another crack in the protective plating. The second struck just below the ethereal's lowest ribs, in a gap where the armor plates met. Kithara doubled over with a sound like breaking crystal. "The weak points," Marcus observed quietly, speaking to no one in particular. "Every structure has them. Joints, connection points, places where flexibility requires compromise. Sergeant Rodriguez has been studying your people's physiology and equipment since we arrived." King Valtheron found his voice at last, though it emerged as a strangled whisper. "She's been studying us?" "Standard operational procedure," Marcus replied with diplomatic neutrality. "Know your environment, understand potential threats and allies, identify tactical advantages and disadvantages, basic survival skills for anyone operating in unfamiliar territory." In the center of the room, Kithara was learning exactly what those survival skills meant in practice. Despite her massive advantages in size, strength, and reach, she found herself consistently out of position. Every attack she attempted was anticipated, deflected, or simply avoided with minimal effort. Meanwhile, Elena's counterattacks found their mark with disturbing regularity, each one targeting a specific weakness in armor or anatomy. The human woman moved like she had been studying ethereal combat techniques for years rather than days. She understood the rhythm of their fighting style, the way they used their forearms in coordination, the slight delay between neural impulses and muscle response that existed in any large creature. Most importantly, she understood that bigger and stronger didn't automatically mean better. Kithara attempted a grappling maneuver, using her size to try to pin her smaller opponent. It was a reasonable strategy. Even with damaged armor, her remaining strength should have been more than sufficient to control a human. But as her arms closed around what should have been Elena's torso, the human was no longer there. She had dropped low and rolled, coming up behind the ethereal champion with perfect positioning for another strike. This time, she targeted the back of Kithara's knee, where the armor was thinnest to allow for movement. The impact sent the champion stumbling forward, her graceful balance disrupted. Before she could recover, Elena had moved again, this time striking at the base of the skull where the helmet met the neck guard. Kithara collapsed to one knee, her coordination failing as neural pathways were temporarily disrupted. Her patterns flickered weakly, the bioluminescent display that normally showed her emotional state now pulsing erratically. "Yield," Elena said quietly. "You fought well, but this is over." The ethereal champion tried to rise, but her balance was gone. 3 strikes to critical points had compromised her armor, her mobility, and her nervous system. She was still conscious, still technically capable of fighting, but any continuation would only lead to more serious injury. Kithara began, then stopped. In over a century of combat, she had never faced an opponent who could predict her movements so accurately or exploit weaknesses with such precision. The human had fought like someone who understood ethereal physiology better than most ethereals did. King Valtheron rose from his throne, his patterns now showing the deep purple associated with profound shock. "The match is concluded," he announced, his voice hollow. "The human is victorious." The words seemed to echo in the vast chamber, bouncing off crystal surfaces and returning as whispered confirmations of the impossible. The greatest warrior of the ethereal kingdom had been defeated by a creature 1/3 her size, wearing no armor and carrying no weapons beyond knowledge and skill. Elena stepped back and offered a respectful nod to her fallen opponent. "Thank you for the match. You're an excellent fighter. I learned a great deal." Kithara managed a weak laugh as she accepted help from 2 court guards. "Learned? You fought like you had been training against my species for years." 3 days, Elena corrected. Though we had good teachers. She glanced toward Marcus, who maintained his diplomatic expression, despite what might have been a hint of smugness around his eyes. Lord Xanath approached cautiously, his patterns shifting to colors that suggested deep confusion mixed with growing respect. How is this possible? Our warriors train from childhood. Our bodies are evolved for combat. Our technology is superior to anything your species possesses. Elena considered the question seriously. Training from childhood can create habits and assumptions. Evolution optimizes for survival, not necessarily for facing new challenges, and technology is only as good as the understanding behind it. She paused, watching as Kithara was helped toward the medical chamber. Your people are incredibly strong and fast, but you've been strong and fast for so long that you've forgotten how to fight someone who isn't. The assembled court began to murmur among themselves, their patterns creating a kaleidoscope of colors as they processed what they had witnessed. Some showed anger, others fear, but a growing number displayed the golden hue associated with intellectual curiosity. You said 3 days, King Valtheron observed, his voice still strained. You learned enough to defeat our greatest champion in 3 days? Marcus stepped forward. Your Majesty, may I suggest that this demonstration illustrates exactly why humanity deserves a seat at the galactic table? We bring different perspectives, different approaches to problems. We see possibilities that others might miss. The king looked from Marcus to Elena and back again, his 4 eyes showing the kind of intense focus usually reserved for matters of state security. Different perspectives, he repeated slowly. Yes, I begin to see that. But this raises as many questions as it answers. Elena had moved to where Kithara was resting against the wall, receiving treatment from the court physician. The ethereal champion looked up as the human approached, her patterns showing a complex mix of pain, respect, and something that might have been admiration. Will you teach me? Kithara asked quietly. Your fighting style, your methods of analysis. I have never encountered anything like it. If you'd like, Elena replied, though you might find it different from what you're used to. Human martial arts focus heavily on adaptation and problem-solving rather than raw strength. King Valtheron heard this exchange and felt something shift in his understanding of the small beings who had requested audience. They weren't just weak creatures seeking protection. They were bringing capabilities his people had never encountered, ways of thinking that could benefit everyone. But such revelations also brought new concerns. If humans could defeat ethereal champions so easily, what did that mean for the established order? What other surprises might this seemingly primitive species hold? The throne room remained filled with tension, but it was a different kind now. No longer the anticipatory energy of watching a predetermined outcome, but the uncertainty that came with realizing the universe was larger and more complex than previously understood. The medical bay of the ethereal palace hummed with activity as court physicians worked to treat Kithara's injuries. The damage to her armor had been repaired quickly enough, but the psychological impact was proving more difficult to address. She sat on an examination platform, her patterns cycling through colors that indicated deep contemplation mixed with wounded pride. King Valtheron stood nearby, having dismissed most of his court to consider the implications of what had occurred in private. Only Lord Xanath remained, along with Marcus and Elena, who had been invited to observe the treatment process as a gesture of good faith. The physical damage is minimal, reported Chief Physician Melody, her patterns showing professional satisfaction. Bruised tissue, minor neural disruption, nothing that won't heal completely within a few cycles. However, the psychological impact, she gestured helplessly. Kithara has been our champion for 87 years. This is her first defeat. Elena approached the examination platform carefully, her hands visible and movements non-threatening. "How are you feeling?" Cathara's patterns shifted to a rueful blue-green. Humiliated, confused, and strangely grateful. She flexed her shoulder experimentally, testing the range of motion. "For 87 years I have faced opponents who fought the way I expected them to fight. Bigger, stronger, faster, variations on familiar themes. You fought like—" She paused, searching for words. "Like the laws of physics themselves had decided to oppose me." King Valtheron's 4 eyes focused intently on Elena. "Explain this to me. How does a species that barely reaches our waists produce warriors capable of defeating our finest champions? Are all humans capable of such feats?" Elena considered the question seriously. "Not all, Your Majesty. I have specialized training and experience that most of my people lack. But the principles I used, observation, analysis, adaptation, these are fundamental to human survival. We've had to develop them because we're not the biggest or strongest species on our home world." "Your world has stronger species than humans?" Lord Xanath asked, his patterns showing surprise. Marcus smiled slightly. "Your Majesty, Earth is home to creatures that make ethereals look small. Blue whales that exceed 30 meters in length, elephants that can weigh 8 tons, predators with claws that could slice through armor plating. Humans survived not by being stronger, but by being smarter. And by learning to work together," Elena added. "We hunt in groups, share information, build on each other's knowledge. A single human might not be a match for a lion or bear, but humans working together can track, predict, and overcome almost any challenge." Cathara's patterns shifted to thoughtful orange. "Group tactics, coordinated strategy. We ethereals have always prized individual combat prowess above all else. Our greatest heroes are those who achieved victory alone." "There's honor in individual skill," Elena acknowledged. "But there's also wisdom in recognizing when cooperation might achieve better results. In my training, I studied not just fighting techniques, but geology, biology, physics, psychology, anything that might give me an advantage in understanding my environment and opponents." King Valtheron began pacing, his massive form moving with agitated energy. "This changes everything. If human warriors can defeat our champions through superior tactics and knowledge, what does that mean for our military doctrine? Our expansion plans? Our position in the galaxy?" "It doesn't have to mean conflict," Marcus interjected diplomatically. "Humans aren't seeking to replace ethereal dominance. We're offering partnership. Your people have strengths we lack: advanced technology, stellar engineering capabilities, centuries of administrative experience. We have strengths you might find useful: adaptability, creative problem-solving, the ability to see familiar situations from new angles." Lord Xanath's patterns flickered with interest. "You're suggesting an exchange of knowledge?" "More than that," Elena said. "I'm suggesting that different approaches to the same problems can lead to better solutions for everyone. Your champion is an excellent fighter who's mastered traditional techniques. If she learned human tactical analysis, she'd become formidable in ways no one could predict. Similarly, if human fighters learned ethereal strength training and coordination exercises, we would create warriors superior to either species alone." Cathara finished, her patterns now showing excited yellow. "A synthesis of approaches." King Valtheron stopped pacing and studied the small group gathered around his champion. The political implications were staggering. For millennia, ethereal society had been built on the assumption of their physical superiority. Government, military structure, diplomatic relationships, all of it based on the certainty that they were the apex species in their region of space. But if humans could challenge that assumption so effectively, other species might follow suit. The stable order that had brought peace and prosperity to dozens of worlds could be undermined. Unless— "Ambassador Chen," the king said formally, "your people's request for equal status in our alliance is granted. Furthermore, I propose an expanded partnership agreement. Marcus blinked in surprise. Your Majesty? A cultural and military exchange program. Ethereal officers will train with human forces to learn your tactical methods. Human officers will train with our forces to benefit from our physical conditioning and technological capabilities. Scientists from both species will collaborate on research projects. Diplomats will cross-train to better understand each other's negotiation styles. The king's patterns shifted to determined gold. If this demonstration has taught me anything, it's that we have been thinking too narrowly. The universe is vast and full of surprises. Species that appear weak may have hidden strengths. Methods that seem primitive may contain profound wisdom. We cannot afford to dismiss possibilities simply because they don't match our expectations. Elena stood and offered a respectful bow. That's very wise, Your Majesty. And if I may suggest, this exchange should extend beyond just military applications. Human agricultural techniques might improve crop yields on ethereal worlds. Ethereal architectural methods could help us build better cities. The potential for mutual benefit is enormous. There is one concern, Lord Xanath said carefully. If other species learn that humans can defeat ethereal champions, it might encourage challenges to our authority across the sector. Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. Elena spoke first. With respect, my lord, that might not be entirely a bad thing. A government that rules only through fear of physical force is vulnerable to anyone who can provide an alternative. But a government that rules through competence, wisdom, and beneficial partnerships becomes stronger with every new ally. King Valtheron finished. Yes. You're suggesting we transition from conquest-based expansion to alliance-based growth. It's worked well for humanity, Marcus noted. We've established colonies and trade partnerships across dozens of systems, not by conquering worlds, but by offering mutually beneficial relationships. Kithara rose from the examination platform, testing her balance and movement. I request permission to be the first ethereal officer assigned to human military training. I want to understand how they analyze combat situations, how they identify weaknesses, how they turn disadvantages into advantages. And I'd like to recommend Sergeant Rodriguez as the first human officer assigned to ethereal training, Marcus added. She could benefit from your strength conditioning programs and advanced combat technologies. Elena nodded agreement. I'd be honored to participate in such an exchange. King Valtheron's patterns settled into the steady gold that indicated firm decision. It shall be done. Lord Xanath, draft the formal agreements. I want this partnership to serve as a model for our relationships with other allied species. As the group began discussing details, Kithara approached Elena privately. I must ask, when you struck me, were you holding back? Could you have caused more serious injury if you had chosen to? Elena considered the question honestly. Yes, I was holding back. Human martial arts include techniques designed to kill or permanently disable. I used only enough force to demonstrate capability while ensuring you could recover fully. Even in defeat, you showed mercy and respect for your opponent. Kithara's patterns shifted to deep respect. Among my people, such behavior is considered the highest form of honor. You could have humiliated me completely, but instead, you preserved my dignity while making your point. There's an old human saying, a true warrior's greatest victory is the one that doesn't require fighting. Today we fought, but the real victory is the understanding we've achieved. King Valtheron overheard this exchange and felt his respect for the small human delegation grow further. They had not come seeking to dominate or humiliate. They had simply wanted fair treatment and the opportunity to contribute. When challenged, they had demonstrated their capabilities decisively, but without cruelty. Perhaps most importantly, They had immediately focused on how their victory could benefit everyone rather than using it to demand concessions or extract revenge for past slights. As the negotiations continued into the evening, word of the unprecedented match began spreading throughout the palace and beyond. The story would grow in the telling, as stories do, but the core truth remained. A human warrior had defeated an ethereal champion through skill, preparation, and intelligence. Within days, the news would reach every world in the sector. Some species would see it as hope, proof that the seemingly invincible ethereals could be challenged. Others would view it with alarm, evidence that the galactic balance of power was shifting in unpredictable ways. But in the crystal throne room of Zephyria Prime, as three suns set beyond the transparent walls, a new kind of alliance was being born, one based not on dominance and submission, but on mutual respect and the recognition that even the greatest strengths could be improved through cooperation and understanding. The age of ethereal supremacy was ending. The age of true galactic civilization was about to begin, and it had started with a single perfectly placed strike that shattered more than just armor. It had shattered assumptions, pride, and the barriers between two very different species who were discovering they had more in common than anyone had imagined.